Thank you, Noel. We're down to our last two speakers this afternoon, and let me tell you now a little bit about Brian Mayerson. Brian is alive today thanks to organ donation. He received a kidney and a pancreas. He found the family of his donor, and they have a strong and enduring relationship today. His own experiences, including having dialysis and meeting other people while waiting for donor organs, led him to found Share Life Australia Limited. That organisation promotes the proven way to improve Australia's startlingly low rate of organ donation. To hear more about the impact donors have had on his life, please welcome Brian Mayerson.
Thanks, everybody. It's really quite an honour to be here, and I hope that I don't get too emotional about my amazing story. It's Wednesday, the 17th of June, 1999, a very cold morning in Brisbane, as Matthew gets up, as usual, to go to work. His plans on going to gym after work to build his muscular physique that he is so proud of. This is a photograph taken by one of his good friends who sent it to a modelling agency as a joke, and he actually got a job from it. Almost about exactly the same time on Wednesday morning, I get up. I was in Sydney expecting just another usual day. At 2 o'clock, I pack up to go home in preparation for my usual 5-hour home dialysis session. I had been on dialysis for 3 years as a result of kidney failure from 35 years of diabetes that developed when I was 11 years old. That was my life for 3 years. As I say, every second day I spent five hours sitting in that position. At about the same time that I was just about to sit down on dialysis, Matthew starts to develop an unusual headache. It gets so bad that he decides to go home early. When his flatmates eventually arrive home, they cannot wake him. After persisting for a while, they call the ambulance. His mates call his sister Louise. She goes to the hospital to sort him out. Matthew's a naughty boy, and it's always Louise's job to try and get him out of mischief, thinking that he's just up to another one of Matthew's playing the fool. At the hospital, he is diagnosed with a brain hemorrhage and admitted to intensive care. Louise is told that he is extremely unwell. In shock, she calls the other members of his family, and they start arriving from various places around the country. By 10 p.m, I have completed my dialysis. I've sterilized my machine. As a diabetic, I do my usual blood sugar tests, have a snack, and then literally fall into bed after another exhausting session. All that night, Matthew's condition continues to deteriorate. Around midday, with his family around him, the doctors advised that Matthew is brain dead. After conducting all the necessary tests that are required to diagnose brain death, Matthew's mum, Dorothy, immediately asked the doctor if Matthew can donate his organs. This is in response to an instruction Matthew had given her a few years before when his friend's daughter had died while waiting for a liver transplant, an event, I'm told, that really upset Matthew. The doctors are quite surprised and are quite taken aback that they've been approached by a mother whose son is in such a desperate situation. But eventually they call the organ donation coordinator, who then starts making all the necessary arrangements. Most of the family find it far too difficult to deal with all the processes and procedures and leave Dorothy, mum, and Louise, the sister, to make all the decisions and sign all the required documents. Blood tests, tissue typing, etc. commence so that compatible recipients can be found for all the organs. That evening, while all this is going on, I walked to my brother Stephen for dinner. Soon after dinner, I start to feel a bit unwell, so I leave to go home. By the time I walk past the local Coles, I realise that I'm having a pretty severe hypo. As you should know, it's a diabetic hypoglycemic effect. I remember walking inside, grabbing the first packet of sweets I can find, sitting on the floor and stuffing my mouth full of sweets. 10 minutes later, I get up, still dazed but more in control, pay for the lollies and make my way home. Feeling pretty rotten, I again test my blood sugar, have another snack, and to make sure that I don't have another hypo during the night, and then go straight to bed. Just before midnight, my phone rings. And Paul, the transplant coordinator at Westmead Hospital, says, "Hi Brian, this is Paul from Westmead. How are you?" This is the call I've been preparing for over 3 years. So I know exactly what I'm going to say to him, because we've all been very well trained. Extremely well, I tell him. I say knowing any response indicating that I might not be well could jeopardize my chances of being chosen to receive a transplant. Paul advises, "I think we have organs for you. Sleep well, and we'll call you when the organs arrive." 6 a.m. Saturday morning, Paul calls me and says, "Get here as soon as you can." I jump out of bed, call my brother Steve, and he is there in minutes to drive me to Westmead Hospital. All goes extremely well. A healthy kidney and a new pancreas inside of me. That's my first day out of bed post-transplant. A new life. No dialysis, no diabetes, no more hypos as I've just described, no more insulin. Freedom is the best way I can describe it. Just the most amazing experience to go through. It takes me months to get used to sitting down to a meal, without wondering what my sugar level is, eating and drinking what I want, and most importantly, when I want it. It's just quite amazing. You've done this for 35 years, and suddenly you're free from all these medical issues that you've had to deal with all your life. The whole time, my donor and his family are in my thoughts. All I knew was that my donor was male, a big person, he had very large organs, and one is in late 20s. 3 months later, once the doctors are confident that all is going well, I write to my first anonymous letter to my anonymous donor. Or should I say to my donor's family. After writing for quite a few letters over the ensuing 5 years, in August 2004, I received my first anonymous letter from my donor family. That's a copy of it. It took them 3 years to write. As you can see, there are different dates on it because they typed something and then they put it in their drawer. They couldn't send it. They then wrote something else on it and couldn't. And eventually the third year went past and they wrote at the bottom, "Dear Brian, it is 3 years that we have been sitting on this letter. So if I don't mail it today, I never will." Fortunately, it arrived. Many letters then go between us in the next few years, and I slowly get to know more about my donor family. Anyway, in the meantime, 4 months after the transplant, I returned to my renal clinic that I had attended every month while on dialysis. A guy who I'd become very close to, John, is not there. When I ask where he is, I'm advised that he passed away about a month after my transplant. I was really, really upset by this news, as I have known quite a few fellow dialysis patients who have passed away during my 3 years on dialysis. The statistics are quite shocking. 15% of dialysis patients die every year. In stark contrast, only 2 to 3% of patients post-transplant die every year. It struck me that it's just not fair that Australia has such a low organ donation rate compared to so many other countries. I had no idea what to do, but I decided that something must be done about it. I met many people from various organizations who all advised me, you just don't understand. We're doing the best we can. This is when Australia is achieving less than 1/3 the rate of the leading countries. At that time, we were procuring technical 10 donors per million. So with a population of about 20 million people, we were getting, say, 200 donors per annum. Whereas we should have been procuring, if we, like the leading countries, around 600 donors per annum. In 2003, I'm introduced to Marvin Weinman, a retired CEO of a large multinational company. I convince him that we must do something about it, and together we decide that we should investigate how to improve Australia's organ donation rate. We assemble a team of really exceptional volunteers, doctors, lawyers, and corporate consultants to investigate what the leading countries are doing. We establish Share Life. After 5 years of investigation, we prepared a very detailed plan and approached Prime Minister at that stage, Kevin Rudd, in March 2008. In July 2008, the Prime Minister announced a national reform package to, I think I've got the wording up there, to establish Australia as a world leader in organ donation for transplantation. A further little thing that acknowledges at the bottom there Share Life's contribution to it. Yeah. This is a hospital and doctor-based system and stops blaming the population for not registering. I think you're going to be quite surprised to hear me say this, but it is a major change to the systems that have been in operation for more than the previous 20 years. I'm sure all you know is that the population is not registering, and that is the reason for our low organ donation rate. I will bet that none of you have heard that the real reason is because hospitals are not procuring enough organ donors. This is a very important topic, and we'll be happy to discuss it further at any other time. Not enough time today. Despite very strong resistance and from certain groups in the health sector, the plan has been implemented in bits and pieces. In 8 years, our donation rate has doubled, despite the resistance. And most importantly, there has been no increase in registration rates in the country. But it is still 50% of what the leading countries are achieving. I don't want to get too technical, but here's a few figures. Unfortunately, 2016 data has not yet been released, but Australia has improved from there. At the bottom, you can see 18.1. We're at now 20 donors per million, which, as I say, is a doubling since we started. But the most important issue in that slide is if you look at the top on the left-hand side, it shows that if we were able to achieve the same rates of organ donation as the leading countries are achieving, we should be able to save another 1,400 lives every year. Now, that's a most amazing number of people. At the moment, we do approximately that number. We do around 1,500 transplants a year. We should be doing double that. It is just really unacceptable that so many people are not getting the transplants that they so deserve. As I say, there is still a lot of work to do to ensure that the systems are in place in all the hospitals with ICU units throughout the country. After 8 years, we now have the data that clearly shows that the entire increase comes from improvement in the hospital systems. I don't want, again, not too technical, but this graph, which has I've put together all the information that is put out by what they call the Organ and Tissue Authority every year. I've put it out over the last 8 years. And what this shows, at the very bottom line, you can see that registration that is being pushed by governments. We spend a fortune of money on advertising. Every single health minister, whether state or federal, tells people to register, has not changed in the last 8 years. It is being approximately 25% of the population are registered, and it just doesn't change. For those business-orientated people, this is an absolute example of a saturated market, where no matter how much more advertising you give, you're just not going to get an increase in consumption or registration. But what it does show, and that's the top line, and again, what that shows is the number of potential donors, and that is the doctors identifying possible donors in the hospitals. So you can see that in the last 2 years, we had that massive increase in the doctors identifying possible donors. And that all came about when 2 years ago, after us pushing Minister Fiona Nash, who was the health minister at that stage, for an inquiry into the system, because the government has been spending $45 million a year, and you can see the increase in the actual donation rate, which was the second lowest line in the graph, had hardly been increasing over that period. Small increases, but not for the amount of money that was being spent. She then implemented this inquiry. And what happened was, even before the review came out, the donation rates started increasing. And why? Because the doctors in the hospitals knew that they were being monitored. There were doctors in the hospitals who knew that their job was to look at every possible donor, and a possible donor is somebody who's dying, and the doctors must then evaluate whether that person who is dying has the potential to become an organ donor. And what happens? You see that massive increase in those 2 years just because the doctors are being watched and monitored. They identified more, so then therefore the number of requests made to families increased, the number of consents increased, and the number of actual donors increased. It gave 100% evidence that it's all about what happens in the hospitals. So, the most important part about it is coming back to lives. Just across the road, where it is St. Vinny's, there are 20, 21-year-old kids with cystic fibrosis dying simply because there are not enough organs being procured. We have to ensure that our politicians, our bureaucrats, and hospital administrators have the systems in place to ensure that every potential donor is identified and that many of them become organ donors. Anyway, back to my personal story. And while all this is proceeding, I still have this desperate desire and need to meet my donor family and thank them face to face, even though this is not allowed in this country. It's another long story, but I eventually tracked them down. In June 2012, 13 years after my transplant, I write a letter directly to them, providing all my contact details, and I wait to see if they wish to establish contact with me. On the 12th of October 2012, my phone rings. I pick it up, and I hear, "Hello, Brian. This is Dorothy." Thank you.